Jack Riker was not a soldier, not a hero, and definitely not someone used to being stared at by 1,000 alien eyes. He was just a human repairman, fixing heat coils and cooling vents on outer colony stations. And today, he happened to be on the alien moon of Kreltar, fixing the pipes of a warrior fortress. He didn't expect to be dragged into a celebration, the Festival of Steel, a wild yearly tradition of the warrior clans. But there he was, standing awkwardly near the giant fire pit, surrounded by tall, armored aliens who could probably crush him. With one hand they were shouting, drinking something that looked like glowing soup, and smashing weapons together to show strength. Jack just sipped his water and tried not to make eye contact. And then she walked in. Vale Rin, daughter of the War Baron, the fiercest warrior maiden in the Kreltar clans. She was over 7 feet tall, wrapped in red-black armor, and carried a massive spiked mace made of star metal on her back. The crowd roared as she stepped forward, proud and sharp like a blade. "Another bloodless year," she said to the crowd. "Still no suitor strong enough to lift my weapon?" They laughed and she smirked. That's when her glowing eyes fell on Jack. "What's this?" she said loudly. "A human? Did someone lose their servant?" More laughter. Jack forced a polite smile. "Just a technician here to fix the air system." She narrowed her eyes, amused. "Do humans have arms? You look like a noodle." Jack shrugged. "Noodles fix good pipes." The warriors chuckled and Vale Rin stepped forward, reaching behind her back. "Then tell me, Noodle Man," she said mockingly, "can your soft arms hold this?" With a single hand she pulled out her ceremonial war mace and let it slam into the ground with a sound like thunder. Dust jumped, and even the other warriors took a respectful step back. The mace was huge, nearly as long as Jack's entire body, thick, with etched runes, spikes, and a weight that could crush a steel drum. Jack blinked. "That's a little big." Vale Rin smirked and held it out toward him. "Hold it if you can." The crowd began to chant. "Let him try, let him try." Jack looked at the weapon, then at her face. She was sure he would drop it instantly. She didn't expect him to even lift it. And honestly, neither did Jack, but something in her mocking smile lit a fire in his chest. He stepped forward and took the weapon in both hands. It was heavier than anything he had ever held. Like holding a bag of bricks dipped in lead. His knees bent, his arms screamed, but he didn't let go. With a groan, he lifted it off the ground, then, slowly, shaking, raised it above his head. Silence fell. No one made a sound, then a deep horn echoed across the square. Vale Rin's smirk vanished, her eyes widened. The War Baron stood up from his throne made of bones and steel, his voice booming. "The human has accepted the trial of the mace." Jack blinked. "The what?" the crowd murmured. "He held the mace. He triggered the tradition. He must now face the trials." Vale Rin stepped forward, grabbing the mace from him and planting it into the ground, her face serious now. "Foolish human," she said quietly. "Do you know what you just did?" Jack looked around, sweating. "I lifted a weapon." "You challenged for the right to court a Kreltar war maiden," she said, voice flat. "Me?" Jack coughed. "Wait, I didn't sign up for that." "The mace decides." "An elder," said, stepping forward. "And you lifted it before witnesses." Jack looked at the alien faces all around him, some shocked, some angry, others impressed. Vale Rin turned away sharply, her voice low. "You won't survive the trials." And with that, she vanished into the crowd. The guards came forward and took Jack by the arms, not roughly, but firmly. "You will be prepared." One said, "The first trial begins tomorrow." Jack looked up at the moonlit sky, confused and stunned. He had only come to fix a broken vent. Now he was stuck in some ancient warrior ritual because he was too stubborn to let go of a joke weapon, but deep inside something stirred in him, a quiet voice saying, "Don't back down." And for the first time in a long while, Jack Riker didn't want to walk away. Jack Riker didn't sleep much that night, not because of the hard stone bed or the strange alien sounds echoing through the warrior hall, but because his brain couldn't stop spinning. What had he done? One moment he was fixing broken heaters and the next he was locked inside an ancient fortress with guards outside his room and alien warriors whispering his name like he was some kind of legend or fool. He sat on the cold edge of the sleeping platform, staring at the heavy wooden door, replaying the moment over and over. Valrin's expression, first amused, then shocked. The mace in his hands, heavier than anything he'd ever touched, and that horn, that cursed horn. Suddenly, the door creaked open. An elder walked in. Tall and thin, with glowing green eyes and long braided hair tied with bones. She carried a book made of metal plates and chains. "You held the mace," she said calmly. "Now you must understand the law." Jack stood up slowly, confused. "I didn't mean to challenge anyone, it was just a joke." "There are no jokes in Kreltar steel," the elder replied. "Only truth weighed in metal." She opened the book and began to read aloud. In ancient times, when warlords ruled the stars, the Kreltar people made a sacred law. Anyone who lifts the Mace of Binding must face the 3 trials to prove their worth to join the bloodline of warriors. Jack blinked. "Join the bloodline?" The elder nodded. "You held the War Maiden's weapon in public during the Festival of Steel, and you did not fall, did not let go. You are now seen as a suitor." Jack nearly choked. "I didn't mean to be a suitor." "That does not matter," she said, closing the book. "Intent does not erase tradition." Before Jack could argue more, the room darkened. A shadow loomed at the door. Valrin entered, her armor stripped down to a training suit but still looking like a walking blade. She stared at Jack with cold fire in her eyes. "You should have dropped it," she said flatly. Jack raised his hands. "Look, I didn't know it meant all this. You humiliated me," she snapped, stepping closer. "In front of warriors, nobles, and my father." "I didn't do anything but hold it," Jack replied, standing his ground. "You gave it to me." She glared at him for a long moment, then turned to the elder. "Has he been told?" "Yes," the elder said. "He now knows the law of steel." Valrin turned back to Jack. "Then he must also know this. No one survives all 3 trials unless they were born to it. Even trained warriors fall." Jack frowned. "So why do it?" She stepped even closer, her voice low and sharp. "Because now it's not just about a joke, it's about honor." Jack didn't answer. He understood now. This wasn't just tradition to them, it was identity, pride, blood. She leaned in slightly. "You think your strength is impressive? Holding the mace is not strength, surviving the trials is." Jack looked her in the eyes and said quietly, "Then I'll survive them." A flicker of something. Doubt? Respect? Crossed her face before she turned and left the room. The elder smiled. Interesting. Later, Jack was brought to a hall where the past names of suitors were carved into stone walls. Most were scratched out, marked with failure, or death symbols. He was handed simple armor, custom-fitted overnight, still too heavy for his liking. 2 guards flanked him silently as they led him to a huge war chamber, where alien nobles sat in tall chairs of metal and bones. And at the far end, the war baron himself sat with glowing red eyes and a stare that could break mountains. He stood up and spoke loudly. "Human, you have entered our law through action, not word." Jack nodded, unsure if he should speak. "You face 3 trials," the war baron continued. "The trial of the beast, the trial of the mind, and the trial of the bridge. If you fall, your bones will remain in our Hall of the Broken," he said without emotion. "If you succeed by tradition, you will be bonded to my daughter and become blood-sworn to our clan." The crowd murmured, some gasping, others laughing. Jack glanced at Valrin, who stood tall beside the throne, her expression unreadable. "Trial 1 begins at first light," the Baron said, then nodded to the guards. Jack was taken back to his room, his legs shaking, but his heart strangely calm. He wasn't ready. He didn't have weapons, or training, or any idea how to fight alien monsters. But he had something else. That same stubborn voice in his chest that refused to let go of the mace when everyone laughed at him. That voice was louder now. He sat down on the stone platform again and whispered to himself, "I may not be born for this, but I'm not quitting. And outside his door, hidden in the shadows, Valrin listened in silence. The arena of Kreltar was older than memory itself. Built from the bones of fallen beasts and carved from volcanic stone, it stretched wide and deep, like a crater of war echoing with roars of the past. When the suns rose, the arena roared, to life again. Trumpets of bone blew from high towers, and warriors flooded the stands, wearing armor that gleamed in red, black, and gold. Jack Riker stood at the center, alone. He wore strange armor designed overnight, pieced together for a human form. It didn't fit well, too tight at the chest, too loose at the knees, and in his hands, nothing. No weapons, no shield, just trembling fingers and a racing heart. Across the arena, massive gates shook as something behind them growled. The War Baron stood on a high platform with Valrin beside him, her arms crossed, face cold as steel. A horn blew and the War Baron's voice echoed across the Colosseum. Let the trial of the beast begin. The gates slammed open, and the crowd fell silent. What came out was not a simple animal. It was a nightmare made flesh, the Korg, 10 feet tall, 6 limbs, 2 jaws, and eyes that burned like fire. Its body was thick with muscle and bone armor. Its claws could slice through tanks. Jack took a step back instinctively. There was no way to fight that thing. He had no weapon, no plan. The beast roared and charged. Jack didn't think. He ran, not away, but to the side, ducking under a stone pillar as the Korg smashed where he'd just been. Dust exploded, the crowd shouted, and the beast roared again. Spinning toward Jack, Jack scrambled behind a broken wall, gasping for breath. His mind raced. He couldn't fight it directly. Not in size, not in strength, but maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to fight like a warrior. He needed to think like a technician. He scanned the arena quickly. Stone columns, hanging chains, bits of broken armor scattered on the ground. The Korg charged again, and Jack rolled under a fallen beam. Grabbing a broken metal hook in the process, he used it to climb one of the chains hanging from the side pillar. Going up halfway before the Korg spotted him again, the crowd roared, expecting him to be pulled down and crushed. The beast leapt at the pillar, shaking it with its massive body. Jack nearly fell, but he held on, swinging around and, without thinking, looped the chain around a hanging torch fixture above him. Then he yelled loudly, "Hey, ugly!" The Korg snarled and charged again, straight under the looped chain. At the right moment, Jack dropped. The torch fixture came loose, the chain wrapped tight around the beast's thick neck, yanking it backward. As its own force pulled it off balance, it crashed to the ground hard. The crowd gasped. Jack rolled to his feet, panting. The Korg snarled, struggling to get up, but it was stuck. Chained and twisted between 2 pillars, Jack picked up a large piece of broken armor and approached the beast. He could finish it now, he could crush its head, but he didn't. Instead, he threw the armor aside and walked away. The crowd was silent. The War Baron stood slowly, surprised. Valrin's eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. Jack turned to face them all and raised his hand. Not in victory, but peace. I'm not here to kill for fun, he shouted, voice shaking but firm. I came here by mistake, but if you make me fight, I'll survive my way. The silence turned into whispers, then surprisingly a few claps, then cheers, loud, thunderous cheers. The War Baron raised his arm. Harsu, he has passed the trial of the beast, trumpets blared. Jack dropped to one knee, breathing hard, body shaking but alive. Far above, Valrin watched him carefully. Something was changing inside her. This human didn't fight with hate. He fought with wit, with restraint, with something she hadn't seen in a long time. Control. She turned and left the platform without a word. Her thoughts heavy. Jack, still on one knee, whispered to himself. 1 down. Then he looked up at the rising suns. 2 to go. Jack Riker thought the worst was over. He had survived the beast. He had walked out of the arena on shaking legs, with the crowd roaring behind him. But when the Elder came for him the next day, her face held no pride, only silence. Today is not about strength, she said, leading him down a long corridor lit by green fire. Today is about the mind. Jack followed her barefoot, still sore from the fight. His back ached. His shoulders felt like bricks, but he nodded, saying nothing. They reached a tall chamber made of smooth black stone. The walls pulsed like veins, and at the center stood a round platform with strange markings glowing beneath it. Around the chamber sat 7 alien judges, ancient telepaths, each wrapped in silken armor, their eyes closed as if dreaming. Rin stood beside her father, arms crossed, watching Jack quietly. The elder turned to Jack, her voice softer now. "This is the trial of the mind gauntlet. No beast, no blood, just your mind against the maze." Jack swallowed. "What kind of maze?" "One made from your memories," she said. "Your fears, your shame, your guilt." Jack hesitated. "And how do I win?" "You survive it," the elder said. "Or you don't." Then she motioned for him to step onto the platform. Jack took a deep breath and did as told. As soon as his foot touched the center rune, the world shifted. The chamber vanished. The fire, the stone, the judges, all gone. He stood in the ruins of his home on Earth. It was burning. Flames danced across twisted metal and the air was filled with smoke. He coughed, backing away. "Jack!" A voice called out behind him. He spun around. It was his younger brother, Matt. 10 years old again, just like the last time Jack saw him. "You left us," Matt said, his voice shaking. "You promised you'd come back." "No," Jack whispered. "This isn't real." "You said we'd all go to the colonies together," Matt cried. "But only you got on that ship," Jack closed his eyes, trying to push it away, but the world screamed louder. Now his parents stood behind Matt, pale, cold, judging. "You ran," his father said. "You escaped Earth, and you let us burn." Jack clenched his fists. This isn't real, but he felt the heat. He smelled the smoke. The pain was real. He fell to his knees, whispering, I didn't know it would be that bad." Suddenly the world changed again. Now he stood in a starport hangar years ago, his first job after fleeing Earth. He saw himself walking away from a crying alien girl, someone he could have helped, someone he ignored. She begged for food. He kept walking. The guilt rushed back like a wave. More memories came, times he lied, times he failed, times he stood by and watched when he could have acted. Each one hit like a punch to the chest. His breath quickened, his head pounded. He screamed, "I know I failed," and then silence. The burning faded. The voices disappeared. Jack opened his eyes. He was back on the black stone platform, his body drenched in sweat, hands shaking, chest rising and falling like he had run for hours. The judges opened their eyes one by one. Their leader, an elder with a golden faceplate, stood and spoke. He did not run from his pain, he faced it. Another judge nodded. He did not hide his guilt. He endured it. The war baron said nothing. But Rin leaned forward slightly, watching Jack with narrowed eyes. Jack stepped off the platform, stumbling, nearly falling, but catching himself. The elder woman helped him up, whispering, "You have passed." Jack didn't smile. There was no pride in surviving that trial. Only heaviness, pain he thought he buried had come back, and he had faced it without turning away. Rin walked down from her seat and stopped in front of him. She stared at him quietly, then asked, "What did you see in there?" Jack looked into her eyes and said simply, "Myself." Rin blinked. No clever words, no defense, just truth. She stepped aside. As Jack limped away toward the healing chambers, Rin watched him go, feeling something twist inside her chest. The human was not like the others who came before. He wasn't stronger, he wasn't faster, but he was something else, and that scared her more than any beast or blade ever had. The fortress of Kreltar was quiet that night. No horns, no shouting warriors, no clash of steel in the training halls, only silence. Even the wind that howled through the stone towers seemed to hold its breath. Inside a small stone chamber, Jack Riker sat alone. His wounds had been treated, his body rested, but his mind would not calm. He had passed 2 impossible trials. He had faced the jaws of the Korg and the horrors of his own memories, and now only one trial remained, the final one, the hardest one, the trial of the bridge. Jack stared at the glowing cracks in the stone floor, trying to prepare himself. But how do you prepare for the unknown? He didn't know what the bridge was or what waited on the other side. All he knew was this: Tomorrow it would end. Either he would walk away free or not at all. A soft knock came at the door. Before he could answer, the door opened. Vial Rin stepped in, not in armor, not in warrior gear, but in a simple cloak, dark blue with no markings. For the first time, she looked more person than legend. Jack stood quickly, surprised. Didn't expect visitors. Vial Rin closed the door behind her, saying nothing at first. She looked at him closely, as if searching for something on his face. Finally, she spoke. "You should not have come this far." Jack gave a tired smile. "Believe me, I didn't plan to." Vial Rin stepped closer, her voice softer now. "No one has passed the first. 2 trials in over 60 years. Not even the chosen sons of great houses." Jack shrugged. "Guess no one told me I wasn't supposed to." A faint smile touched her lips, but only for a moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the stone platform across from him. Silence hung in the air for a while, just 2 people in a quiet room, breathing the same heavy air. Then she said, "You were not born here, not trained in our ways, and yet you keep standing." Jack looked at her carefully. "Why does that bother you?" Vial Rin looked down at her hands. "Because you weren't meant to make me feel this." He tilted his head. "Feel what?" "This confusion," she replied, her voice sharp but uncertain. "I don't know if I want you to pass tomorrow or fail." Jack said nothing. She went on. "If you pass by tradition, you become blood-bound to my clan, to me." Jack nodded, slowly. "And if I fail?" "Then everything returns to normal," she said, her voice almost bitter. "You become just another story, like the others who tried." Jack leaned forward, his voice low. "You afraid of the tradition?" "No," she said quickly. "I fear what it will mean if you live." Jack stared at her. The great warrior Vial Rin, the woman who mocked him, who tried to humiliate him with a weapon too heavy to lift, now sitting in front of him, not with fire. "In her eyes but doubt you gave me the mace," Jack said slowly. "But it gave me something too." She looked up confused. Jack continued. "A reason to stop running." Vial Rin's breath caught. Jack stood up and walked to the small window carved into the wall. Stars filled the sky outside. He spoke without turning. "I used to think I was just drifting through life, fixing things, surviving, never standing for anything. But then you put that weapon in my hands," he said, voice firm. "And suddenly I was part of something ancient, something that mattered." Vial Rin stood slowly. She walked toward him, stopping at his side. They both stared out the window side by side. The trial of the bridge. "We'll break you," she said quietly. "It's not strength or courage they test, it's heart." Jack looked at her. "Then I'll give them mine." For a long time they stood like that, saying nothing more. Finally, Vial Rin turned to him and said, "You should rest." Jack nodded. "Yeah." She stepped toward the door, then paused, her hand on the handle. Without turning, she said, "If you die tomorrow, I won't forget you." Jack smiled faintly. "That's better than most people get." And then she was gone. The room felt even quieter after she left. Jack lay back on the stone bed, staring at the ceiling. His chest felt heavy, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that told him this was no longer about tradition, no longer about surviving trials or earning respect. It was about her and about proving, maybe just once, that a human heart could shake the stars. Asterisk, the third sun rose behind the jagged peaks of Kreltar, casting a sharp orange light over the war fortress. The sky shimmered like fire, and the people gathered in complete silence. No drums, no chants, only the tension of breath held too long. Everyone knew what today meant, the final trial, the one no one had passed in generations, the trial of the unbreakable chain. Jack Riker stood on the edge of the ceremonial canyon, dressed in cracked armor and wrapped in old leather straps to protect his hands. Chains were already locked around his chest, arms, and legs. A rusted iron collar clicked around his neck, connected to 2 large weights dragging behind him. The war baron stood at the highest ledge, arms raised. "Today, the human faces the last trial," he shouted. "The bridge of endurance." Across the canyon, suspended by bone-woven ropes and heated metal beams, was the trial bridge. Long, narrow, and glowing from heat underneath, the bridge was only one path. Walk across, burdened by chain and heat, while carrying the war maidens. Mace in hand, if he fell, he would vanish into the lava smoke below. Jack looked up at the sun and then down at the mace now returned to him. Heavy, sharp, alive with energy. Valrin stood nearby, her face unreadable, her arms crossed tightly as if holding back something more than emotion. A single horn sounded. The trial had begun. Jack took one step forward. The bridge groaned beneath his feet. The heat rose instantly. Each step was like walking on burning metal. Sweat rolled down his face within seconds. The chain clanked behind him, resisting his movement with every inch. The mace in his right hand pulled his arm downward like a stone. The crowd said nothing, only the sound of metal, fire, and Jack's breathing filled the air. One step, then another and another. The leather on his boots began to burn. His breath came in gasps. Halfway across the bridge, his knees buckled. He fell hard, face smacking the hot metal, and the crowd flinched. Valrin took a step forward, but the war baron raised a hand. He must choose to rise. Jack groaned, pressing his palm against the blistering surface, and pushed himself up with a scream. He staggered forward again. His arms shook. The chain dragged behind him like a ghost. Every part of him screamed to stop, to let go, to quit. But then he heard a voice. Not out loud, but deep in his mind. Valrin's voice, from the night before. "If you die tomorrow, I won't forget you," Jack growled through clenched teeth. "Not yet," he pressed on. Near the end of the bridge, the ropes began to snap from the heat, one by one. The bindings holding the bridge started to fray and pop. The final meters were unstable, swaying like a loose thread in the wind. Jack stepped onto a weak plank. It gave way. He nearly fell sideways into the canyon, but caught a support beam with his chained hand. The mace dangled from his other arm, still gripped tight. "Drop it," a voice from the crowd whispered. "He can't hold both. He's going to die." But Jack did not let go. He pulled himself up with one arm, screamed through pain, and slammed his feet onto the final board. With the last of his strength, he staggered across the end of the bridge and fell to the ground. Smoke rising from his body, chains clanking around him, silence again, then a single sound, clap, then another, and another, until the entire canyon echoed with roars and chants. The war baron stood, face unreadable. He did not fall, he did not break, he did not surrender the mace. By fire and chain, the human, as past trumpets blew. Jack lay on the ground, blinking at the sky, unable to move. And then she was there. Valrin, kneeling beside him, her hand touched his face gently, wiping soot from his cheek. "I told you not to survive," she whispered. "And you still did it." Jack coughed a laugh. "You sound disappointed." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at his hand, still holding the mace, and slowly took it from him, not as a joke, not as a challenge, but as a warrior, accepting the result of an ancient promise. The crowd bowed as she stood, mace in hand, and raised it toward the sky. "By blood and steel," she said loudly, "this human has earned the bond." Jack closed his eyes, not from weakness but from peace. He hadn't just walked the bridge, he had crossed a line no one thought possible, from outsider to legend, from mockery to mate. The fortress of Kreltar had never seen a morning like this. The fires were lit, the bells were rung, and every clan banner flew at full height. It was the day of binding, a day that hadn't been celebrated in over 2 centuries, because for 2 centuries no one had passed all 3 trials. Until now, Jack Riker, a human from Earth, stood in the center of the Great War Square, dressed in ceremonial armor made just for him. It wasn't flashy, it didn't shine like the others, but it was real, forged by the same fire he had crossed, bound by the same steel he had carried, and blessed by the same pain he had survived, the Gao. Chains he had worn in the last trial now hung behind him, not as burden but as symbols of honor. Before him stood the war baron, flanked by 6 elders of the clans. To the left of the baron stood Valrin, no armor, no helmet. She wore traditional crimson robes lined with silver rings, her clan's crest resting over her chest. She did not smirk, she did not glare. She watched Jack like one warrior watches another, with respect. The war baron stepped forward, his voice deep and heavy, echoing off the stone walls. Before blood, before fire, before oath, there is the truth of steel. He turned to the crowd. This human held the mace when he should have dropped it. He faced the beast when he should have run. He opened his mind when it would have been easier to hide, and he walked the chain bridge while carrying the weight of fire and failure. The crowd listened in silence. No cheering, no clapping, just the stillness of history being made. The war baron turned back to Jack. By ancient law, you have earned the right to claim bond with the warrior Vaelrin, daughter of Kreltar's bloodline. He held out the heavy mace, cleaned and polished, its runes glowing softly in the morning light. Do you take this weapon, not as a challenge, but as a sign of unity? The baron asked. Jack stepped forward. His hands were still bandaged, his body still bruised, but he stood tall. He gripped the mace, not shaking this time, and raised it slowly. I do, he said simply. A ripple of emotion passed through the crowd. The war baron nodded, then turned to his daughter, Vaelrin of the House Steelborn. Do you accept this warrior, not by bloodline, but by bond of fire and choice? Vaelrin stepped forward, eyes locked with Jack's. For a moment, everything around them faded. The pain, the laughter, the trials, even the mace between them. Yes, she said. By fire I accept. The war baron raised his hands. Then, by blood and steel let the bond be sealed. A loud drum sounded. A beam of light from the rising sun struck the mace between them. Jack and Vaelrin both placed one hand on the weapon. The metal warmed under their touch, and the runes glowed brighter, responding to the unity of two who had once stood on opposite ends of strength. Suddenly the runes pulsed outward, forming a glowing circle beneath their feet. The crowd gasped. The binding had responded. The mace had chosen. Jack looked at Vaelrin, unsure what to say. She leaned slightly closer and whispered, You still smell like smoke? He grinned. You still look like you could break my ribs with a hug. She chuckled. A real, soft sound. Not the sharp laugh of the warrior princess, but the smile of someone finally letting their guard down. The war baron turned to the crowd and shouted, Let the record show. Today a human became clan. Now the crowd erupted. Roars shook the walls. Blades were raised in salute. Alien warriors stomped the stone ground as their version of applause. Elders nodded in respect, and even the coldest generals smiled. Later, at the feast, Jack sat beside Vaelrin at the high table. He was still not used to the attention, or the strange food, or the way alien children kept asking to touch the chain scars on his arms. But he was smiling. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was living. He was seen. Vaelrin nudged him with her elbow. So, Earthman, what will you do now that you've become a legend? Jack looked around, then leaned closer. I was thinking of fixing your fortress heaters. They still sound awful. She laughed again, and this time, she didn't hide it. The stars above Kreltar shimmered brightly that night, as if even the galaxy was watching, not because a human had survived the impossible, but because he did something rarer. He changed hearts. He turned tradition into choice, mockery into meaning, and in doing so, he earned something stronger than steel. He earned her respect and maybe something more.